Thank you. Good morning. The assembly I'm going to give today is the result of a trip my wife and I took 2 summers ago to Germany to study the Nazi regime and the Holocaust. And while we were there, we visited 2 concentration camps, Bergen-Belsen, where Anne Frank died, and Dachau, the first concentration camp in Germany. We also visited a lot of museums dedicated to the regime and the Holocaust. I also did a lot of reading before, during, and after the trip. I'm going to quote directly from 3 books today, one about the Nazi doctors, one called Army of Evil about the SS, and one called No Ordinary Men about resistors to the Nazi regime. I'm also going to do something that I never do, which is I'm just going to read most of my comments because I'll go faster that way. Trying to put together an assembly on the Holocaust has proven to be much more difficult than I imagined. It is simply too big and too terrible to do any real justice in a 15-minute assembly. If I had the entire day to speak to you, I could not even begin to scratch the surface of how and why the Holocaust happened. So what I will attempt to do instead is examine or focus on just a few elements of the Holocaust and look at them through a somewhat non-traditional lens and hopefully leave you with a takeaway or 2 that you can apply to your own lives. Before I begin, I should warn you that some of the pictures and videos I'm going to show are graphic and upsetting. I did not include some of the most disturbing images I found in my research, but I do think it's appropriate to show you some of this stuff so that you can get an appreciation for it. I'm going to start with footage from 2 different videos, hopefully. The first is from Triumph of the Will, which you read about, was referenced frequently in Boys in the Boat. So here's just a few seconds from this. And I'd like to contrast those images of sort of the glory and greatness of the Third Reich with this video, this is real footage taken by American soldiers after they liberated Buchenwald, a concentration camp.
Pictorial evidence of unprecedented crimes perpetrated by the Nazis at the Buchenwald concentration camp. The story in written form is contained in the official report of the Prisoner of War and Displaced Persons Division of the United States Group Control Council, which has been forwarded from Supreme Allied Headquarters to the War Department in Washington. It states that 1,000 boys under 14 years of age are included among the 20,000 still alive at the camp, that the survivors are males only, and that the recent death rate was about 200 a day. Nationalities and prison numbers are tattooed on the stomachs of the inmates. The report lists the surviving inmates as representing every European nationality. It says the camp was founded when the Nazi Party first came into power in 1933 and has been in continuous operation ever since, although its largest populations date from the beginning of the present war. One estimate put the camp's normal complement at 80,000. In the official report, the Buchenwald camp is termed an extermination factory. The means of extermination? Starvation complicated by hard work, abuse, beatings, and tortures, incredibly crowded sleeping conditions, and sicknesses of all types. By these means, the report continues, many tens of thousands of the best leadership personnel of Europe have been exterminated. Bodies stacked one upon the other were found outside the crematory. The Nazis maintained a building at the camp for medical experiments and vivisections with prisoners as guinea pigs. Medical scientists came from...
I'm going to stop there. I think you get the idea. In presenting this assembly, I'm operating under the assumption that all of you have studied the Holocaust at some point during your time in school. Nevertheless, a brief sketch of the Holocaust is probably appropriate at this time. The Holocaust was the systematic, bureaucratic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its collaborators. Holocaust is a word of Greek origin meaning sacrifice by fire. The Nazis who came to power in Germany in January 1933 believed that Germans were racially superior and that Jews deemed inferior were an alien threat to the so-called German racial community. I hope you all basically know that. In 1933, the Jewish population of Europe stood at over 9 million. Most European Jews lived in countries that Nazi Germany would occupy or influence at some point during World War II. By 1945, the Germans and their collaborators killed nearly 2 out of every 3 European Jews as part of the final solution to the Jewish question. Although Jews were the primary victims of Nazi racism, other victims included Roma, Sinti, Slavs, people of color, homosexuals, political prisoners, and religious minorities. Additionally, at least 200,000 mentally or physically disabled patients, mainly Germans living in institutional settings, were murdered in the so-called euthanasia program. As Nazi tyranny spread across Europe, the Germans and their collaborators persecuted and murdered millions of other people. Between 2 and 3 million Soviet prisoners of war were murdered or died of starvation, disease, neglect, or maltreatment. The Germans also targeted the non-Jewish Polish intelligentsia for killing and deported millions of Polish and Soviet civilians for forced labor in Germany or in occupied Poland, where these individuals worked and often died under deplorable conditions. In total, the Nazis murdered more than 11 million non-combatants. The 2 most obvious questions one must ask when presented with these facts are, how did the Holocaust happen, and why did it happen? Survivors, perpetrators, scholars, and students have been asking these questions for the last 70 years, and it is not my intention today to provide anything resembling a comprehensive answer to those questions. The truth is that there are countless factors that led to the Holocaust. But I want to focus on one particular reason that I'd never considered until my wife told me about a baccalaureate address that one of her colleagues, John Wood, gave a few weeks before we left on our trip for Germany 2 summers ago. His message boiled down into a few sentences is this: It is commonplace at graduations to hear the speaker tell the graduates to follow their dreams and strive for greatness, and then provide them with examples of what our culture holds up as success and greatness. But in so doing, graduation speakers run the risk of emphasizing greatness over goodness and defining success by the amount of stuff we have rather than the amount of good we do. But the truth of the matter is that following our passions, chasing our dreams, and achieving greatness have no value, no meaning, if they are not pursued and achieved with character and decency. At the end of the day, what matters most is not how great you are, but how good you are. As a teacher and a coach who regularly exhorts his students and players to strive for excellence, John's message really made me stop and think. In the world of athletics, it's not uncommon to hear coaches say that the enemy of great is good. The point is that individuals or teams who are satisfied with merely being good will never be great. There is, of course, some truth in this statement. In order to become the very best at something, you can never be complacent with your success. You must always strive to be better. But John's claim that greatness can be the enemy of goodness caused me to look through a new lens at a lot of different things, and one of those things was the Holocaust. I'm going to read you a brief description of an event carried out by SS troops in the Ukraine. On the 20th of September, a notice was posted around the city of Kiev addressed to the Jewish population. All Jews living in the city of Kiev and its vicinity to report by 8 o'clock on the morning of Monday, September 29th, to the corner of these two streets I can't pronounce. They're to take with them documents, money, valuables, as well as warm clothes and underwear. Some 30,000 Jews arrived at the designated location in the belief that they were about to be evacuated to labor camps. The Jews were then marched in groups of 100 or so through the Jewish cemetery to the ravine of Babi Yar. Once there, they were ordered to strip naked and pile their belongings neatly. Kurt Werner, a member of SS Special Unit 4A, described what happened next. He said, "Soon after my arrival at the execution site, I was ordered to the bottom of the ravine together with other comrades. After a short time, the first Jews were brought to us via the slopes of the ravine. The Jews had to lay face down at the edge of the ravine. 3 groups of marksmen were in the pit, around 12 marksmen. Jews were constantly brought from above to these groups of marksmen. The Jews following had to lie down on the corpses of the Jews who had already been shot. The marksmen stood behind the Jews and killed them by shots in the neck. Today I still remember the horror of the Jews who saw the corpses in the pit. Many Jews were shocked and screamed. The whole morning I had to stay in the ravine. There I was ordered to shoot again and again for a while, and then I was busy filling machine pistol magazines with ammunition. During this time, other comrades were detailed for shooting. At noon, we were allowed to leave the ravine, and in the afternoon, together with other comrades, I had to bring the Jews towards the pit. During this time, other comrades carried out the shooting in the pit. We brought the Jews to the border of the pit. From there, they ran down the slopes themselves. On this day, the shooting went on until approximately 5 or 6 p.m. In all that day, 33,771 people were murdered. It's hard to imagine that many people. This auditorium holds 485 people. It would take 70 auditoriums to fill that pit with dead bodies that day. It's hard to imagine, but what might be even harder to imagine, and what I want to talk about today, is that while German soldiers and their collaborators murdered over 2 million Jews in mass shooting operations in Eastern Europe, the majority of Jews killed in the Holocaust were killed not by soldiers, but by doctors and other medical professionals. At Auschwitz, the largest of the German extermination camps, doctors presided over the deaths of almost all of the 1 million victims of the camp. Doctors performed selections both on the ramp, and this is a picture of that, both on the ramp among arriving transports of prisoners and later in the camps and on the medical blocks. Doctors supervised the killings in the gas chambers and decided when the victims were dead. Doctors ordered and supervised and at times carried out direct killings of debilitated patients on the medical blocks by means of phenol injections into the bloodstream or the heart. In connection with all of these killings, doctors kept up a pretense of medical legitimacy by signing death certificates listing spurious illnesses. Doctors consulted actively on how best to keep selections running smoothly, on how many people to remain alive to fill the slave labor requirements of the camp, and on how to burn the enormous numbers of bodies that strained the facilities of the crematoria. But even before Auschwitz and the other death camps, the Nazis had established a policy of direct medical killing. Killing arranged within medical channels by means of medical decisions and carried out by doctors and their assistants. The Nazis called this program euthanasia, and it laid the foundation for the Holocaust. Euthanasia, and its Greek derivation, means good death. The word is generally used for actions taken to facilitate the deaths of those who are already dying, and has long been a subject of debate for the physicians, moral philosophers, and the general public. The Nazis, however, used the term euthanasia to camouflage mass murder. The Nazi euthanasia program provided both the method, the gas chamber, and much of the personnel for the death camps of the Holocaust that followed. It's the role of the German doctors in the Holocaust